Hello, dear friends. Uh, I would like to tell you about the very complicated combinations of the Kremlin's policy uh, in and out of Ukraine. The point is that the latest news connected with the fire in the Krasnogorsk city uh, echoed in various events, distant events. First of all, I would like to draw your attention to 2 points. The mobilization or expelling of Asians from Russia into the Central Asia countries it has two aims: to get reach to reach the regimes in this area and help them to promote repression that is very useful for the Russian Federation in the struggle with Biden's administration. So let's start listening in more closing way.
The fire in Crocus City-Hall is getting the SMO back to the track of Central Asia, Afghanistan. Mass media reviews and conclusions about the fire in Krasnogorsk on March 22nd are almost all old-school stereotypes. In fact, this is the transfer of the rails of the SMO, Special Military Operation, from Ukraine and Israel to Central Asia versus Afghanistan under the Taliban, and a byproduct of global anti-Semitism after the events in Gaza has appeared itself in the form of the seizure of the property of prosperous Jews who fled the Russian Federation by ruling anti-Semites. The obvious arson of the Crocus Center by the special services with their lazy pursuit of terrorists, and the same extinguishing deprived its owner, a mountain or Caucasian Jew Agalakov, of his former influence on Moscow and Baku. Immediately after that fire, the Russian authorities canceled their patronage over both Jewish relocators and guest workers from the south. In the Russian Federation, xenophobia is being fanned against the residents of Central Asia for their deportation for alleged complicity in the arson of the Crocus Center with unproven mass victims there without DNA analysis. After similar deaths of Prigozhin and Navalny with their fake funerals, the authorities are brazenly drawing the figure of 300 plus victims of the fire in Krasnogorsk. Allegedly, more than Israelis and their guests were killed in Gaza on October 7th. None of the old-school media gurus and outside the Russian Federation see any goals for this urgent deportation of the Islamic element. But this is the turn of our armored train on the siding from the rails of the SMO in Ukraine to Central Asia. It's a line from the Russian song Kukovka with a militaristic context. I prefer the line, "Get back to the track." Moreover, with that conflagration, the Kremlin decided on a large scale, one, to clear the country of migrants from Central Asia in order to attract them as labor there, at their place of birth, or, conversely, they might here, in the Russian Federation, become mercenaries for the SMO and, most importantly, for future wars in the global south. The Kremlin decided to exchange the Asians who left for white-skinned and Russian-speaking workers and servants from the liberated areas of Ukraine, in particular, to reduce the influence of the Islamic element. They say that the elites of the United States, the EU and the United Kingdom are already moaning because of Muslim pressure on those elites, and this could become the basis of negotiations with them on the occupation peace treaty with Ukraine. 3. After March 22nd, the detained ex-janitors and taxi drivers are offered a choice: to join the labor armies when returning home and work on construction sites according to the plans of the SCOBRICS, or 4. Undergo military training in the Russian Federation and occupied Ukraine to overthrow Zelensky in Kiev, Netanyahu in Israel and the Taliban in Afghanistan. Well-known media gurus and outed the Russian Federation and Ukraine live by the theses of psychological warfare. They use them to blind fans on the internet by saying that opponents are always fools and psychos, and the media gurus themselves are not. In 25 years, those seedlings of psychological warfare have become trees beyond which you can't see the forest. Those old misconceptions get in the way of serious analysts, Gary Tabak, Andrei Larionov, and elevate the frivolous ones. Milov, Felgenhauer, Aslanman, the experts of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which is on Khodorkovskaya's payroll. They do not see a clear shift in the center of gravity of NATO, EU, and US forces and means of transfer from the Ukrainian and Israeli fronts to the Eastern Front in Central Asia. That's what we're talking about here. It seems that MBK Khodorkovsky needs The Hague to return his own $55 billion from Putin, who was cursed by MBK media gurus. In short, the Dems in the struggle for power with Trump want to deploy the containment of the Russian Federation from Europe around Ukraine, the Baltic states, Moldova and Serbia, back to Afghanistan, that is, to get everything back to the track. Then you don't have to give money to Zelensky. He is set to receive $61 billion. Biden will save this money and compensate for the loss of U.S. weapons in Afghanistan for $85 billion in 2021. Free and easy. For all gullible and loyal Russians, the Kremlin security services and the media gurus who have fallen on their hooks have conducted a thorough analysis of the obviously sloppy imitation of the March 22 terrorist attack in Krasnogorsk. Then they discussed and forgot the topic of Tajik terrorists with the Uzbeks, Turkmens and other peoples of Central Asia who joined them. Here it is, a new potential of Islamic terrorism. Moreover, from March 22 to April 1st, no kidding. Guest workers are sent home. Which of media guru knows why? I don't see my hands raised. And then, in the Russian Federation or there, on the ground, they can be trained for battles with the Pashtuns of the Taliban, even if the Taliban has Beijing as its patron. In the last summer, Beijing gave couple AI cameras to read the faces of opponents of the Pashtun Taliban. And the Maoists are eager to touch the weapons of the Americans left behind in 2021. This, by the way, is an indictment of a military tribunal against all the generals headed by General Milley. After Gaza on October 7th and the completion of the SMO in Ukraine, the international order outside the EU has been destroyed. Next in line is Central Asia, where foreign workers are being expelled from the Russian Federation. They are ready for the Muppet show at the SCOBRICS summit in October. Old-school media gurus do not see that the Kremlin is reducing the threat of its own invented Islamic terrorism inside the Russian Federation to strengthen and protect the new labor and fighting force of the dictatorial family clans in the countries of Central Asia. Well, and for manipulating them as Muppets at the SCOBRICS summit. Xenophobia among the masses of the Russian Federation during the mobilization of guest workers from Central Asia for the special military operation will clearly reduce the conscription of white-skinned students and ex-prisoners. This is one of the guesses why the terrorist attack of March 22nd was played out with fake, burned corpses. By the way, one wrapped corpse was lying and smoking, and the filming of the torture of captured Tajiks as identified terrorists was simply teased and intimidated by professionals from the US NATO intelligence services. On March 25th, a widespread hunt was announced for 158,000 violators of migration legislation out of 10 million labor migrants in the Russian Federation. Putin has already signed the decree on the conscription of 150,000 people. Got it? The decline in potential threats from the Islamic element in the Russian Federation has been accompanied by waves of anti-Semitism since Gaza October 7. As a result, the people deported from the Russian Federation are part of the labor army to work according to the agreed plans of the SCO-BRICS. Moreover, if the agents themselves under the leadership of Moscow and Minsk do not implement them, then the Chinese will help. Since 2013, China has been developing the Belt and Road Initiative, under which it is creating sea and land routes in Asia, Africa, and Europe. Well, the Kremlin's media gurus are urging the residents of Central Asia to cooperate with the PRC in the construction of the Belt and Road through India to her ocean. At the same time, a course has been taken to revive the Northern Alliance against the colonizers of the Pashtun Taliban. Everything is like Putin's historic game with Ukraine, only now the Uzbeks, Tajiks, Turkmens, and Kazakhs are called upon to regain their lands from the times of the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. Invented in 2015 by the US and Russian intelligence services, the ISIS Khorasan movement claims, for example, Khorasan, Transoxiana, and Khorasan, three historical regions of Greater Iran. There is no Pashtun state on that map. What, then, are the Taliban's claims to power in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan historically legal? It's like a war between the Palestinians and the Jews of Israel over their ancestral land. Alas, these problems have so far been ignored by media gurus and their bosses, who are the centrist sovereignists. All of them are still engaged in the old-school mentality of US NATO RF plotting in Ukraine and Gaza. Behind these conflicts, old-school people do not see deglobalization with its fragmentation, and their new triggers of conflicts and points of no return are multiplying everywhere. Moreover, they have already been received from AI. This is exactly how General Austin is changing the military political schemes of the United States. He easily steers wars around the world from the hospital bed through AI, just like Putin from the tomb coffin, according to Valerie Salveille. But as to our media gurus, they have suffered with political myopia, or rather, night blindness, apparently under the influence of a myriad of dark money from racial and clerical lobbyism tribalism on the Capitol Hill and the Kremlin. Inside the Biden administration, everything is shrouded in the black-brown gloom of nepotism. Because of nepotism and its lack of professionalism, the Dems are in complete failure and will only be helped by the votes of more Muslims and illegal Chicanos, and not by the Jews hounded by that 15 million mob after Gaza on October 7th. Yes, and in 2020, 72% of US Jews voted for Biden because of fears of a rabble mob. The Dems were also helped by the Digital Union of Jews and Silicon Valley Indians. It was that alliance, not the Kremlin's hackers, that turned Trump as a winner into a loser in 2020 in 3 hours. By the way, the owner of that digital wallet from the Digital Union for Dems is now in prison for 25 years. Under Trump 47, punishment and fees from the Ukrainian land lease await. In the meantime, the Dems and their judges with their media gurus are silent about the priorities of the United States in Central Asia. Just a week ago, a blatantly unjust New York court sentenced the founder of cryptocurrency exchange FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, to 25 years in prison for allegedly multi-billion-dollar fraud. And so, in addition to the money from the judicial fines for Trump, there are clearly anti-Semitic arrests of Jewish wallets. And all this is used to bribe the electors from the mob and illegal Chicanos, etc., by the Dems. Israel with Netanyahu and Ukraine under Zelensky are clearly on the fly without help from Sleeping Joe. He is asleep, but his entourage is not. They have forgiven $68 billion. Students to pay off their debts in private universities. And their anti-Semitism destroys the image of Israel and the Jewish president of Ukraine. It is possible that it was that fire of anti-Semitism that moved to the roof of the Crocus City-Hall Center So, Biden and Putin found themselves in bed with the enemy, as in the movie Sleeping with the Enemy. Meanwhile, Biden's bureaucrats issued $1.2 trillion allegedly for state needs to themselves loved ones, and renegade Republican Lindsey Graham was probably able to pinch off that money to transfer and give to the conspiracy of General Zelensky's people against President Zelensky. That's why Zelensky won't see $60 plus billion to the armed forces of Ukraine. They are promised to the military conspirators, so they will surely be deceived by the Dems. Now, a question for experts from the ranks of media gurus. The transfer of EU NATO military activity from Ukraine to Central Asia is a point of no return for the Dems if they refuse to help Zelensky, or the cunning disguise of the Dems and renegade Republicans of their joint theft from the land leased to Ukraine. Or is this a trigger for the IDF's refusal to help in the fight against Hamas in the face of potential Russian intrigues in Central Asia? Already, the Kremlin's media gurus have announced that Ukraine today, April 1st, does not have an re-elected president. But if it does not exist by May 19th, then Ukraine will simply not be admitted to NATO in July at the 75th anniversary summit. But even now, the question arises, does Ukraine leave the NATO bloc? Even Gary Tabak and Andrei Larionov from the United States, who are sympathetic to me, with Yuri Fedorov from Prague joining them, reflect on the fate of Ukraine like primitive nuclear missile old school men. They do not see the efficiency, for example, of urban guerrilla warfare in Ukraine with its strengthening and self-defensive confederal non-censorism in the format of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth III. The fragmentation of the EU, NATO, and even the Russian Federation is increasingly being announced by the boss, the British and the Scandinavians. They have no hope for the help of the EU, NATO, and the US Dems, where Biden failed because of the nepotism and unprofessionalism of the Democrats in bed with the renegade Republicans. The sovereign centrism of Ukraine, as well as the US under the Dems, is against self-government and self-defensive confederative non-centrism. And it, by the way, as options for Ukraine and Israel, is studied in academic at universities and colleges and military political circles of the United States, retirees and veterans without violations of state secrets laws. And it was done openly, without secrecy. Those U.S. intellectuals are discussing the transition of power to Trump as a non-centrist. They soberly assess the failed experience of the Democrats in Ukraine and their assistance to Israel after Gaza October 7. Here's the bottom line of those revelations. All of them cross out old school knowledge and rely on the results of deglobalization. Those numerous adjustments were summarized by AI in a number of countries and presented at forums in Davos and Munich back in 2023. The Strategic Intelligence Group from the Davos Forum conducts daily monitoring and study, critical, of course, of conflicts in more than 250 areas of heightened attention or 250 topic areas. This group tries to explore and get clarity on the most relevant strategic issues covering more than 250 topic areas. Identify the most relevant expert publications, videos, data, events, initiatives, and stakeholders in those areas. It is not surprising that it was in 2024 that such points of no return appeared in military political planning and diplomatic zigzags of the UN, EU, NATO, which our hairs stand on end. So, the last 2 years have been replaced by old school debates in relationships, from positive to negative, between the global south and the global north. But the conclusions about the points of no return are not recognized by media gurus either in Israel or under the SMO of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. And all because Biden, Netanyahu, Zelensky, and Putin do not see, alas, the fragmentation of their powers and the collapse of federalism and the revival of the U.S. Confederation states go hand in hand. 29 states resist the crazy laws of the federal Dems. The most notorious of these is the coercion of children in schools to study textbooks with racist content against white supremacists in the denial of history. Because of such a turn in education, in the U.S. Capitol, the mob smears graffiti, memorials, and sculptures to the founding fathers of the United States. Everywhere there are growing protests against idiocy with the admission of X-Men to women's sports. By law, states that do not recognize the Biden administration's pseudo-laws are joining the Trump MAGA movement. At campaign rallies, Donald Trump proposes measures to MAGA supporters to free cities from the dominance of 15 million illegal immigrants, black racist gangsters, and red-brown fascists who fill the courts and universities of the United States. Putin already seems to have stolen the idea of mass deportation from Trump, but for his maneuvers, first in Central Asia and later at the SCOBRICS summit, and under the guise of that burn Crocus City-Hall, the Kremlin actively robs well-to-do Jewish relocators and foreigners. Agalakov, an Azerbaijani by passport, has the status of President Aliyev's son-in-law. The latter has become an ardent supporter of the seizure of part of Iran, who, in turn, is an ardent opponent of Israel. Such a cocktail of Putinism and anti-Semitism looks like mix, but not shake. In the U.S., significant Jewish strata of the upper middle class have already been poisoned by the fruits of jurisprudence from the anti-Semite poisonous tree of the Zionist philanthropist George Soros in left New York. They have been fed up with losses and violence from Biden's electoral mob since May 2020. After all, during pogroms and riots, even after a trial, those chavs are immediately released. Corrupt judges of American cities, which are under the Dems, for example, Chicago, release robbers and rapists from arrest as allegedly having the right to rob up to $2,000 in damages. They say that this is compensation for the genetic victims of slavery. Under the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, personal weapons cannot be used against them for self-defense. Trump 47 in his rallies promises to fix this. In the election campaign in the United States, volcanoes of controversy arise due to the failures of the Dems in power. They devalue the very nuclear deterrence of the Kremlin's old school people in Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, and even Central Asia. And Secretary of Defense Austin can only tear himself apart like that monkey in an anecdote. God divided animals separately into those that were intelligent and those that were beautiful. The monkey thrashed about and cried out in despair, "What do you want me to do? Should I break into or something?" This, alas, also happens with the smart and beautiful plans of cybernetic and urban warfare in and out of the United States and among retired intellectuals. For example, veteran reservist Gary Tabak and retired Alexei Arestovich are still talking about barbarians with axe and not about drones and cyber attacks of urban guerrillas. And the Marshal of the troops of Belarus, Lukashenko, recognized tanks and armored personnel carriers in the forests and swamps of Polesie as a panacea for his political health. Meanwhile, those debates about real and mythical cyber wars too from the U.S. were interrupted by the appointment of Microsoft CEO Mustafa Suleyman. For the first time in the cybernetic alliance of American Jews and Hindus, a Muslim has become their boss. In the Russian armed forces, since the summer of 2022, General Sergei Shoigu, a Christian Buddhist, has been in charge of cybersecurity. And in the armed forces of Ukraine, since 2021, Alexei Danilov, the ex-mayor of Luhansk, has been engaged in it. But only until his recent resignation when replaced by Alexander Litvinenko from the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. The new head of the FIS is Oleg Ivashchenko. Judging by their family names, will they flirt with the Muslims from Microsoft or not? Although Rasim Umarov, a genetic Crimean Tatar from Uzbekistan, will surely find support from Mustafa Suleyman as Minister of Defense of Ukraine if he is not hindered by an alliance of digitocrats from Jews and Indians in the United States. Elon Musk does not want to join that union. He has completely refused to support the U.S. Democratic Party and stands for Trump 47. After Gaza the 7th of October, the anti-Semitic Islamic element in the global south, with its 1.2 billion Muslims, woke up. Well, this Islamic element is desperately needed by Biden in the fight with Trump for the White House. Putin also needs an Islamic element at the SCOBRICS summit in Kazan in October. That is why, for the admission of Ukraine to NATO in July, the Islamic element can become both an obstacle and a springboard to the confrontation of U.S. Dems against Trump. After all, only he is for supporting Israel against Hamas and world anti-Semitism through his brilliant Jewish son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Thus, in Ukraine, too, the status of the Jewish President Zelensky depends on Trump 47 more than on the shadow Biden-Obama tandem, similar to the Medvedev-Putin duumvirate when comparing by old-school experts. Vladimir Lu.
All right, that's it. I would like to know your opinion and your remarks. Please send them to me. Bye bye now. See you later.